Today I'm going to be talking with the man, Dr. Dave Kading. Dave, when would you consider so now thinking outside the box, because you obviously you treated the ocular surface, that was the underlying issue. Would you ever even consider maybe orthokeratology for this patient as opposed to a traditional kind of I wear the lens during the day type lens?
Yeah, well, I know both you and I are big fans of orthokeratology, and I tend to reserve ortho-K as a dry eye treatment for those patients who have such severe ocular surface diseases that wearing contact lens gives them blurry vision throughout the day. So, if she would enjoy the benefits of orthokeratology, of freedom from glasses during the daytime, and not have to wear soft contact lenses, absolutely. And that isn't to say that I'm not a fan of ortho-K for everybody, but I tend to want my patients to be capable of wearing a contact lens in their 20s and 30s and 40s. If they can't because of an ocular surface issue, I want to treat that, not just switch them from a contact lens that they're in to something different.
So your philosophy is one, let's make the ocular surface healthy, and now two, let's discuss the options with the patient and
Yeah.
figure out with that discussion what's kind of the best route for them.
Yeah, and I think both you and I were guilty of this years ago, is that we would always just switch the contact lens, try something different, right?
We're a byproduct of our environment, though, Dave. I mean, when you think 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, what diagnostics did we have? What therapeutics did we have? I mean, there was next to nothing. So the only option we had was different artificial tears or different contact lenses. Now we're fortunate because we have more advanced lenses and more advanced diagnostics and more advanced therapeutics.
Yeah, yeah.
Today we're going to be talking to Dr. Jeff Cincino. So there is this kind of definitive difference from perspectives, right? When the AOA is fighting for optometry, we are directly and indirectly fighting for quality patient care as well too. We're fighting for patient safety. We're fighting for the quality of care that we know needs to be delivered to these patients. And it seems like we're one of the only entities that are really doing that. I mean, share with me how you feel about that and how you feel that optometry's role is in making sure that patients get the best care possible in your advocacy efforts.
Look, there is no shortage of disruptive technologies out there that are trying to convince the public to skip the trip, to skip seeing an optometrist. You don't need to go get a contact lens prescription. We'll just give you your contact lenses over the counter. And they use all sorts of deceptive techniques like passive verification to try to accomplish that goal. There's no shortage of companies out there trying to push forward technologies that are unproven, untested, like online vision tests. And they basically are trying to pull the wool over consumers' heads, preying on the ideas of cost and convenience, but not paying any consideration whatsoever to quality. And it's up to organizations like the AOA to repel those forces. Because look, we live in a capitalist society, and they are all trying to make money on the backs of patients. They're trying to insert themselves between the doctor and the patient purely to make money. And it's all about making money for these companies. The AOA is the only organization that has the patient's best interest in mind.
On today's show, we have Dr. Stephen Ferrucci from Los Angeles, California, talking to us on what's new in retina. So let's get right to it, Steve. Tell us kind of like the 3 or 4 things in retina that we need to either kind of know about right now or that we should be looking for in the near future.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Mile, and thanks for such a nice introduction. I might have to hire you as my publicist.
You deserve it, buddy.
Thanks. So as far as what's new, there's a lot of stuff new in retina. And like you said, I'll highlight a few. But the thing that I think is really cool is that, years ago when I started talking about retina, we didn't have that much to talk about. And within the last couple of years, and it seems like every year, we have more and more to talk about in the retina field. So it's really, really nice and really exciting. But there's a couple things I'm excited about. One of the first things I'm excited about is it's been around for a while, but I think there's going to be a little resurgence, at least I hope so, is genetic testing for macular degeneration.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been around probably for about 10 years. There was a company called Arctic DX. They have a test called the macular risk that it's been around for some time, and they've been doing some testing for that. But there's also a newer company out there that I actually am doing a little consulting with by way of, disclosure. But it's called Visible Genomics. It's a newer company based out of Chicago. And they also do some genetic testing for macular degeneration. They do it a little bit differently. They have two separate tests. One is a test that's a progression test. So you would run that on a patient with, maybe early or intermediate macular degeneration. And it would tell you their chance based on genetics and other risk factors, such as like BMI and smoking, stuff like that. It would tell you their risk for developing advanced macular degeneration and subsequent vision loss over the next 2, 5, 10, 20, or up to 30 years.
Wow.
And then, you could use that information to sort of tailor your treatment based on that individual patient's risk. So if they're very high risk, you might not want to see that patient back, on a yearly basis, which might look like, if you just looked at their fundus, it might say, I'll see him back in a year. But if you run this genetic test and you find they're high risk, maybe you don't want to give them quite that much of a leash.
Today, we're going to be talking about the future of optometric technology and inventing stuff for optometrists. Tell me about this interest in Eyecare technology. When did this kind of all come about? Was it while you were still a student, or after you got into practice, were you just like, hey, we need something like this, and you couldn't find it?
Actually, a little bit of both. I was always one of those kids that loved to tinker around with things when I was a kid, and it was something that I didn't really pursue much when I started looking into career paths. I went the healthcare route, but it was always something on the back of my mind. And it was something kind of that was rekindled during my optometry school days. One of my professors was into Silicon Valley, used to work for Apple, was telling me about the different things that are happening in other parts of healthcare, and actually encouraged me to join a hackathon that was happening at a nearby school. And that's kind of when I got the leadership bug.
What in this hackathon? What did you do in this hackathon?
I basically got paired with 5 people that I didn't know. We were asked to find a solution to a problem that existed, and then over 24 hours, develop a solution and then pitch it to a group of judges. So it was kind of like a cram session almost for a test. At the end of it, you get to present. Ended up winning the hackathon, so I was pretty jazzed about that.
Do you remember what that project was? What the problem was?
Yes, I think it was along the lines of a company that would help startups essentially get established, from setting them up with lawyers, consultants, and kind of being an ecosystem for startups, basically.
Today, we're joined by Ilse Homan from Eyely, and we're going to be speaking about utilizing an iPad to help improve your binocular vision in myopia practice. So some people don't know what Eyely is. So tell us a little bit about, running these 5 practices to getting to the time where you're like, I need a solution, and that engineering brain of yours. What led you to say, hey, I need something for my practice? What was the need that you were trying to fill?
So I guess when you see a lot of children and you go through the whole BV and also myopia management, which is something that I've always been interested in, there's a couple of pain points. I'm one of those people that want to have as much as possible information. I think that we can make a much better diagnosis if we have a broader view on the visual system. But then those 4 pain points of actually going through all the tests, then you'd have to take the results, first interpret them, okay, so a little circle here on the Randot stereogram actually means that it's a 30-degree seconds of stereo, and now you got to think, okay, well, this patient is how old? We got to compare it to the normative databases, and then you've got your result. Then you still have to look for patterns to see, is there a vergence or accommodation dysfunction? And then you still got to decide on treatment plan. You got to educate your patient and your parent, because they have to make an informed decision. In the end, it's still their decision. And then after all of that, most of my patients actually required a visual report, which would then take another couple of hours to do. So needless to say, I really loved what I was doing, but I was very quickly becoming very busy. And obviously, coming from a very systematic background of always trying to make things more efficient, it wasn't long before I started making a couple of those processes a little bit more automated.
Today, we're joined by Dr. Brianna Rue, and we're going to be talking about Dr. Contact Lens. Yeah. So let's talk about contact lens technologies that are out there. So we think about the practice side of things, the seeing the patients, the topographers, those types of equipment. For you personally, what direction have you moved in towards for your standard soft contact lens patients? Are you still utilizing some of the older technology in soft contact lenses, or are you daily disposable? How do you incorporate that into your personal practice patients?
Yeah, well, I always want them to hear about the latest and greatest from me. I don't want them to see an ad, come in and wonder why they're still wearing a lens from 4 or 5 or 6 years ago even. So technology is really advancing. So especially with the pandemic and more visual strain and those types of things, and obviously hygiene has become a huge thing. So we've always been a big daily practice. One thing that we know is our contact lens patients are our MVPs. Those are our most valuable patients. And if we let that minus 320 something or 30 something walk with a prescription and they end up online, now they may be getting an online eye exam. So while we're all trying to get into this specialty care with dry eye and myopia control and specialty lenses and aesthetics and other things that we want to bring to our practice, where do you find that patient base? You find that patient base from your contact lens patients. And if you let that patient end up online, you've lost the mom, you've lost the dad, you've lost the grandma, you've lost the kids, you've lost your dry eye practice. So we can't forget about the core of these patients. We all see that maybe contact lenses aren't the most profitable thing for that box, right? But you've got to think longer term on what these patients, their lifetime value to our practices.
Today we're joined with Ron Yam, and Ron is an executive with a company that I'm excited to kind of share with you called Novasight. Novasight is a technology that is developing products around a lot of aspects of eye care that we're using today. So tell us a little bit around the diagnostics, like where you're seeing that eye tracking can be used, and then what you're thinking in the future that we could be using for eye tracking.
Right. So let's start with diagnostics. So we do have already a device on the market. It's called the iSwift and being distributed by EssilorLuxottica. So we already, the device is available, not in the US yet. And this device is already measuring running 7 different tests around visual acuity, around strabismus. So we are, I would say, the experts of measuring the misalignment of the eyes, both the fixed strabismus, but also the latent strabismus, what we call phoria. So your tendency for the eyes to either open up or close once you're tired. Now, so this is one thing. Another thing that we can measure is, for instance, the suppression of the brain and stereoacuity. And very interestingly, we can also measure the reading ability. So we let a kid in different ages read a paragraph, and we follow the eyes, right? And you know that once we're reading, we're using a saccadic movement. So that means that the eyes are jumping from word to word to word, from fixation to fixation. So we are measuring those fixations points, and we can tell how fast the kid is reading, how large are the fixations, does he has to read back, which we call regression. So we can actually analyze the ability or the quality of reading, and then we can grade according to his level. And if his reading is abnormal, in most cases we can say, is it an ocular thing? Is it eye-related issue, for instance, lazy eye? or a need for glasses or strabismus, or it's an unrelated ocular thing that could be ADHD or dyslexia. So this is on the current device. And we have more coming on the next generation device.
I'm joined with Dr. Michael Shiglazian, and we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence in glaucoma. I really wanted to get your perspective on several things. And the first thing I wanted to talk about is, the diagnostics that we have, and also the way that we have the ability to monitor progression over time has just advanced tremendously over the last two decades.
That's really the game changer in my clinical practice, really now 10 years, has really been having an image management system where I can review my OCTs, visual fields, and photographs, and put all of my diagnostic data, from the college, we've got cornea center, dry eye center, retina, and all that. But along with housing all of the diagnostic tests that we do in a repository, a digital repository, sort of like a PACS system where hospitals would put their MRIs and everything, has been the development of progression analysis software from many of the major players in glaucoma care. And we are always so focused on, does my patient have glaucoma or not have glaucoma? That's obviously just the first question. And a more important question after you figure that one out is, at what rate are they progressing? Because these are our patients for decades now. People are living to be 90 plus. If you're taking on glaucoma patients in your practice, I love you and support you. Let's do more of it, because there's a lot of patients out there for us to take care of. And if optometry doesn't do it, then we don't want to turn this over to some other profession. But the long-term management really requires decent hardware from a variety of manufacturers and the software to do the progression analysis so that you can see change over time, as well as get a rate of progression calculation to know if your patient is what we call a slow progressor in glaucoma, about 85% of our patients, or a rapid progressor, about 10, maybe 15% of patients who have, a more severe advanced form of glaucoma. And you can see that by doing enough OCT tests and enough visual field tests. Both are essential. We've not replaced perimetry with OCT. And this progression software will tell you how aggressively you need to treat that patient.
Today we're joined by Dr. Lynn Jones. We're going to be speaking about contact lens technology, new innovations, and 3D printing of contact lenses. Talk to me about the future of contact lenses and some things that maybe we'll see in the next year or 10 years from now that are kind of cool.
Well, it's really, and thanks for that opportunity, Dave, because it's really interesting to think about some of the kind of futuristic things that we actually have on the market now. I think there are a couple of things that we maybe don't appreciate that were 10 years ago science fiction. You're never going to be able to do that. One of the things being something like the transitions contact lens. So that the J&J transitions lens, a photochromic contact lens, it's been something that people have dreamed about for many, many years. And of course, now we've had that in the market for a number of years. Drug delivering contact lenses is another thing. I've been working in the area of drug delivering contact lenses since about 2002. And it seems like such a great idea. Whenever we treat ocular disease, we put drops in. Drops are great because they're nice and easy to pop in. The downside is they don't stay around for very long. They only stay on the ocular surface for, maybe 20 minutes at most before they drain away. So in order to get a therapeutically relevant concentration of a drug onto the ocular surface, you've got to really do two things. First of all, you've got to give a concentration that's really too high, because you need that concentrated amount on the ocular surface. That results, of course, in both expense increase, because you've got more drug in the product than you really need. But the more important thing is potential toxicity issues. A lot of ocular drugs that we see, we end up seeing some potential ocular toxicity because the drug concentration is just too high, solely because it drains from the ocular surface for so long. So for many, many years, we've really tried to have that increased residence time on the ocular surface, and people have done it using a variety of different ways. There's a way of binding it to the ocular surface using things like maybe mucus binding agents, or typically we just tend to bump up the viscosity. You do that, vision goes down. So patients don't like using it. So the concept around actually using a drug depot as a contact lens was actually, believe it or not, in the original Victorly patent. In 1961, Otto Victorly, when he patented HEMA, had in there one of the potential advantages of a contact lens, a soft contact lens, is as a drug delivery device. Can you believe that?